Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg with another great event today here at Hopium Chronicles. We have a returning guest, Colette Delawalla, who's coming back, who's the executive director of Stand Up for Science. She's going to be joined, Lincoln, if we can bring them in, by Dr. Jeremy Berg, who's a professor of computational and systems biology at the University of Pittsburgh and formerly a leading light at the National Institutes of Health. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here today.
Awesome.
Thank you.
We're here for an important and challenging conversation, which is this ongoing war by the Trump administration on science, on academia, on knowledge, on truth, and all the things that they're attacking so savagely. I think that as I, having been in this business for over 30 years, it remains the most breathtaking part of this Trump 2.0, Trump the sequel.
Yeah.
It's so clearly going to damage our economic future. It's going to so clearly limit economic opportunities for our companies and our workers. It's eroding and degrading our public health. It's doing so many things that are the opposite of making America great. And here we are. Mm-hmm. And so, Colette, I wondered if you could just give us a start by just giving us an update and just remind people about Stand Up for Science and what it is and what you're doing, and just give us any kind of update you want. You did a great job the last time you came on, and it's great to have you back.
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So Stand Up for Science, we started in February this year as a direct response to, the Trump administration's war on science. And we saw that start taking place on January 20th. And so we enacted the March 7th rallies across the world in support of science. And since then, we've had the privilege of working with employees from various agencies across the United States government who host scientists there to do these declarations that essentially say, this is why our organization or our agency is important, and we're standing up for science in these ways. We're standing up for the mission of our agency. So we've worked with NASA, EPA, NSF, and NIH employees to do these letters and to provide a way for them to take a stand. And so, as we continue to move through the summer, our big focus now, and has been through the summer, but particularly now as we are in appropriation season, is the fiscal year 2026 budget. So we're very excited. You guys get a little bit of a sneak peek. So on Friday, we'll be announcing our 31 Days of Action campaign. And the idea behind that is 31 days of sustained pressure about science, about maintaining our Institute of Science in the United States for every reason that you just listed. So, hop onto our website, check out all of our social medias. We'll have more information on Friday when we launch that.
So, Colette, the idea behind this is that regardless of what the White House wants to do, Congress has a say in how government spends their money, right?
Yes,
and
the power of the purse.
Power of the purse. And the goal here is to lobby Congress to get them to restore or maintain or even increase funding for these vital programs, regardless of what the White House wants to do on the other end. Because we've actually already seen, this is important for people to realize, is that on the FAA, for example, the FAA is now getting more money in FY26 budget than it got last year, despite the cuts that came from the White House, the rescissions or the cuts, the illegal and unconstitutional cuts that the White House did. So this is not a pie in the sky exercise. I mean, there is a legitimate opportunity for us to restore or retain the integrity of the funding of science in America as we lead up to FY26, right?
Yeah, and we have seen signals of bipartisan support. So Senator Katie Britt led 13 other Republican senators, saying to OMB, hey, you need to provide the funds to NIH that Congress approved. We also saw across the aisle support for NASA and NSF in Senate as they worked through that budget workup. I'm looking forward to see what happens tomorrow morning with the NIH senatorial, right up there. So I think that we've never not had bipartisan support for science. And I do think that we're continuing to see signals of that support. And seems like science is a wedge issue, that it is an off-ramp for people to say, wait a second, we've taken this a little bit too far. Since when did we agree to defunding NASA and cancer research?
Yeah, and I think this is very important because I think so many people are always like, what can we do? Right.
Right.
I mean, and now you're giving us something to do.
Mm-hmm.
And for this community, we are big on making calls and contacting congressional offices, both in the House and the Senate. This is a core activity of the Hopian community. And you're now giving us things to do over the next few months that could be deeply meaningful in helping reverse some of the attacks on science that we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we will have daily actions that we post on our social medias that we send out every day. They won't always just be, make a call or send an email. Maybe things like, get your friends to sign on to these letters or see if you can get one more person to, join these actions. And so it's about community building and, broadening this base of support for science as a wedge issue.
Dr. Berg, if I can go to you now and just have you reflect, perhaps, it seems like in the last few weeks, HHS Secretary Kennedy has escalated his assault on public health. And now we're seeing this new initiative to potentially wipe out the advisory board on preventative care. We've seen now the thing that is actually deeply worrisome to me, him floating the idea of removing the exemptions for vaccine makers from being sued, which could end up destroying the entire vaccine industry in the United States. They're moving with incredible speed and intensity. Can you try to look back at the last few weeks, few months, and give us an update of what you've been seeing?
Yeah, no, I think it's been a chaos machine. I mean, I think the recent things are, as you say, are really problematic. There have also been, just yesterday, shenanigans with OMB saying, oh, by the way, we're going to withhold the rest of the money for this year for funding things both in the intramural program at NIH and for grant making. And then there was pressure brought to bear, apparently, and somebody else in the White House got them to reverse that, we think. I mean, that's what's been in the paper, in the Wall Street Journal anyway. Whether it's happening or not is just unclear. It has been a wholesale assault on institutions that have supported public health, from research at the NIH to activities at FDA and CDC and these advisory boards that have played a crucial role in advising the government about what the available evidence indicates to develop sensible public policy. It's been really a nightmare. I mean, I started at NIH in the George W. Bush administration in 2003 and was there for 7.5 years into the Obama years. And NIH was a completely nonpartisan, we're just trying to get science done for the benefit of the American people. I mean, that's what the NIH staff were there for. That's what the scientists were there for. I mean, they like doing science. It's fun. They find it incredibly interesting. But there was also this higher purpose that people were very much aware of, that takes place, not necessarily in your own lab, but over time, results accumulate, and all of a sudden you've got a new way of addressing cancer or Alzheimer's or some other important disease. And to see politics to see science being painted as too political, when in fact the Trump administration is the one who's politicizing it from what was fundamentally a non-political operation, is just, George Orwell is rolling over his grave.
Can you try to help explain to people the best you can about why you think this is happening, right? Because it's not good for our economy. It's not good for the future of our kids and our families. It's not good it makes America less competitive against our global adversaries. It makes our companies less competitive against other global companies. What is the good, or what is the objective of this on something that looks so apparently so destructive and like something that is akin more to sabotage in many ways than to sort of sound public policy?
Well, I think, there are a couple of components. I mean, it's clear that some people in the Trump administration certainly J.D. Vance and Russ Vought, the head of OMB, have been very public saying that they think universities are the enemy. And some of that is objections around DEI policy and making, education and research more inclusive to people across the country, which certainly overlaps with white nationalism and white supremacy. Mm-hmm. But also it's just fascism 101. I mean, every fascist government has tried to push down universities because that's where people develop empirical evidence about facts and write stuff that people can read and understand about the way the world actually is. And that makes it harder for a totalitarian government to say, no, the sky is green. And there's nobody saying, we measured it, it's blue. So, I think that's sort of the underlying thread. The other theme, which is the one, I've thought about a lot about that question. I think the reason that public health and biomedical research are getting tied up in it so much is their philosophy is basically the ends justify the means. So we think universities are bad, and we think we should bring universities down to their knees so that they will respond to our will and get rid of stuff that we don't like and have, more diversity of opinions on their faculty and all this sort of stuff. And they just don't give a, rat's ass about how they do it. And if that means cutting off cancer research because that's the best lever, I mean, NIH is a huge lever for universities because they're really dependent on the funding to survive, to do what they want to do, to, create new knowledge and to employ talented people who both do research and teach and so on. And it's become, the National Institute of Leverage instead of the National Institutes of Health, because they can say, and universities, unfortunately, in my view, are complying, we're going to withhold $2 billion worth of grants, but if you pay us $400 million, then we'll be nice to you again. And, people, some universities, Columbia, and probably now Harvard, are saying, let's make a deal. And, at least my reading of history and talking to people who study this is, when you give the schoolyard bully your lunch money, he doesn't walk away and say, we're all good. He just says,
see you tomorrow.
Colette, how are you thinking about college campuses and campuses this fall? We talked last time about the idea that it could be that you could begin to see students beginning to engage in this because it's so obviously actions that are curtailing their opportunities in their lives that will make it harder for them to pursue their dreams, to become a doctor, or to do whatever it is. And you're seeing a lot of data now. I mean, I did a private call yesterday with an organization that had just done a bunch of focus groups with young people. And this issue of them losing the same kinds of opportunities that their parents had was the central driving thing that came up in the discourse in this focus group they did with young people. I mean, what are your thoughts about, whether or not this is something that's going to start showing up on college campuses this fall? And how are you thinking about approaching it?
Yeah, so I do think we're going to begin to see a little bit more, standing up and probably some boisterous, good-spirited protesting on campuses this fall. My bet on this is that it's actually going to be faculty leading it and not necessarily students. And part of the reason why I say that is because it's one thing to be able to gauge like how angry a group is or how, what issues a group is upset about. And I definitely think that Gen Z in particular has a lot to be pissed about, and they are bad. But their degree of activation and willingness to engage in these things, I think is actually still relatively low. On the flip side of that, I had the privilege of attending the AAUP yearly event that they do. It happened at Morehouse this year, and I'm in Atlanta, so I popped on over, and I was very, very encouraged to see how I just engaged and riled up these professors are. And I view it as kind of one of the only unions in this space that is actively getting their feet wet. They're, pulling lawsuits every other week in meaningful ways. And so I say that to make the point that I do think we are going to see, more protesting, some political theater, I hope, a little bit more people getting out of their labs and getting onto their local news, writing op-eds, that sort of thing in the fall, pressuring their local electeds. I would love to see more movement from alumni and alumni associations to put that pressure on too. And yeah, I don't think that we're going to see it from Gen Z. So maybe I'll be surprised. But I just don't think that we're seeing that like activation level quite yet.
It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And I've had some conversations with youth groups, and Trump, in the data that I put out today using the Economist YouGov poll, which is a weekly tracking poll, Trump's approval rating with 18 to 29-year-olds has dropped 44 points.
It's not good.
Since the first week of his administration. And I think that young people are in a very different place in their relationship to him than they were 6 months ago, a year ago. And it's going to be, I still wonder, and what I don't know, and it's why I'm so supportive of the work you're doing, is that I think the other piece of this that could become deeply motivating to families, as somebody who has 3 Gen Z kids and just went through, I finally have, my youngest is now in college, right? But I just recently still had kids in high school and around sports events, is this attack on vaccines is really kind of a profound attack on families. And I still think that is going to be an area of opportunity for us to organize around, in a very different way than what you're describing, more along. So I think we need an organization like Moms Demands Vaccines, kind of thing.
Yeah, we did do a CDC rally when the anti-vaccine, well, what was it? That they canceled the recommendation for pregnant women to receive vaccines, the COVID vaccine. During pregnancy. We did one at the CDC and got people out. We got news crews out. I brought my son, like people brought their young children, just to make that point, right? Like that there is this element of like, we deserve access to life-saving medical intervention. It's crazy.
It's crazy. And I think that we have a lot of work to do to convey the crazy. I think the Medicaid stuff is broken through. I think there is, when I talk and interview politicians, what they'll tell me is that on the ground in their districts, there's an awareness that Republicans have taken a lot of money out of healthcare, and that their healthcare is going to suffer for it. This is now, it's in the polling, but it's also anecdotally I'm getting from politicians who've been home that this is broken through. We have to use that breakthrough to start putting other things through this pipe, I think, in the coming months. And it gives us, I think the whole key here is that we have to view this now as an opportunity that we have to seize, right? And not to be in a defensive crouch all the time, which is how it feels, I think. And what do you think, Dr. Berg, you're still active, you're still on a campus, a university campus. What's your sense about what you think will happen this fall in the discourse that will be happening on campuses?
That's hard for me to judge. I think, you mentioned where I'm currently employed, and I am now obligated to say I'm speaking on my personal capacity and not speaking at the University of Pittsburgh. And that's sort of a symptom of the problem. I think universities have been keeping their heads down so much because they don't want to be the next Columbia or Harvard or Northwestern, that they haven't been speaking out. They haven't been pushing back. They've been tolerating their faculty speaking up, but in many cases, just barely tolerating it. Sort of, if you have First Amendment rights. We have to recognize that, but, don't, make sure you distance yourself from us. And again, I think that's been, while I understand the box that they're in between doing the principled right thing and potentially putting their universities at risk, they have definitely lost the trust of a lot of faculty, staff, and students who are wondering where the principles are, other than we need money.
Yes.
Not that they don't need money, but, around the diversity issues, around a whole bunch of other issues, academic freedom issues, they're sort of saying, well, those are negotiable. And they're just in my view, just not really very negotiable. The other thing, and just to introduce a serious dose of hopium here, is
we like that. We like that, by the way. Thank you.
With regard to elected representatives, I think our task is actually pretty easy in the sense that we don't have to convince them that biomedical research is important or that science is important. They know that. All the Republicans know, or not all of them. Most of the Republicans know that. Most of the Democrats know that. They have, if you can have a 10-minute conversation with them and remind them all the things that are true now that didn't used to be true because of scientific discoveries from cancer cures to the internet to putting a man on the moon and all that sort of stuff. The problem is that they are so afraid of Trump and the Trump machine that they don't want to speak out because they're going to get primaried, they're going to get mocked on Truth Social. And so they keep their comments to themselves. If you go visit them, they say, we absolutely agree with you.
Yeah.
When it times to vote, they're voting the other way. And when it times to make public statements, they're missing in action. That's why I think the Katie Britt letter is actually a big deal.
Yeah.
Because it finally got bad enough that she felt obligated. I think probably because of pressure from constituents.
Yeah. I was in her office maybe 3 days that Monday before, before they released that, several of the signers' offices. And there is support. I mean, there is support for biomedical research. They get it.
I mean, I don't want to deflate your bubble. She doesn't care about you. She cares about the residents of Alabama. They're the ones who vote for her or don't vote for her. And, the University of Alabama, Birmingham is the largest employer in the state of Alabama, provides the best jobs or many of the best jobs in the state of Alabama. Attacking University of Alabama, Birmingham, even if you don't believe in biomedical research and public health and all those sorts of things, is just a huge economic hit to Alabama. And, I'm sure the university and a lot of employees and a lot of students and a lot of other people say, you can't mess with this. That's not what we voted for.
Right.
And I think just replaying that same message across, a lot of states that have a big biomedical research footprint, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Oklahoma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They, I think our job is to make it clear to them that, and, if they don't speak out about things that they know to be true and they betray their constituents are going to work energetically to make them no longer be employed as elected representatives.
Well, and let me give you just 2 bits of additional hopium, right? I just want people to understand this Katie Britt letter, or Senator Britt's letter. The 14 signatories were all Republicans. And this is important, right? Is that they didn't want Democrats on the letter because they wanted to make a statement that this was coming from Republicans. And that was important about the gravity of the message. If there had been 50 Democrats on it or 45 Democrats, it would have had less weight inside the Republican Party. And so the way this was even constructed was sending a signal. The other thing that I've been encouraged by, and again, the way I always talk about this is that you never know when you're doing something, when it's going to work. And yes, there are lots of reasons to not believe that Susan Collins or whomever is going to oblige until they do, right? And if we're not putting pressure on them, then they won't. And Susan Collins, based on reports this week, I think Russ Vought's, sort of escalation of the rescission battle, where they are arguing that now you guys in Congress can pass whatever you want, and that's fine, and we're going to come back, unilaterally withdraw stuff as we've been doing from the budget.
Right.
Susan Collins' language on this week, and other Republicans, has been escalating in their, if I can say it, what the fuck, kind of, sort of like, you got to be kidding me here. Like, you guys have pushed us to the wall on so many things. You can't push us to the wall on this, right? This is because if it is the case that we pass a budget and we vote for it, and we work with Democrats and we ourselves vote for it, and you come back and take money out of it, it's basically the end of Congress as we know it. We don't have a legislative branch any longer. And I think that they're beginning to realize that Russ Vought, rather than softening his tone, is actually escalating and wants more and wants to keep going. And you've seen on the record quotes this week of people directly challenging him in ways that, it's not something I think we would have seen 2 months ago or 3 months ago. And so I do think you're right that there are reasons for optimism here. But man, do we have a lot of work to do in the next couple months together to go fight this out, to get as much as we can in this new budget, and to start making Russ Vought, we need to start making him and Kennedy into figures of greater, in the way we did with Musk, right? Like the Musk stuff was successful. We're going to need to figure out together, and we should get together privately and talk about this. But there's been a lot that's gone right. This is not an area that I think we've been as successful as we need to be in terms of the singling out of the two of them for the kinds of public discussion and public approbation as that we saw with Elon. But let me go. Yes, go ahead, Doctor.
I was looking at one other issue about, related to Susan Collins. So I had a blog for a long time called Data Hound, and what I've been doing since January 20th is basically analyzing publicly available data and sort of showing how much money wasn't going out of NIH that should have been, and which grants were being terminated, and so on. And having the facts, one, you understand what's actually going on, and two, you can communicate in different ways. So the states that have actually been hit hardest in terms of the amount of NIH funding that they've been getting this year compared to last year are South Carolina, North Dakota, South Dakota, Maine, where Susan Collins is, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason is that those states don't get a whole lot of NIH money, and there are special programs called the IDEA program, which NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya said he was all in favor of, although they're just, they're not funding them. And the funding, when I looked, when he made that statement, was 4.5-fold less than it was in 2024. And I think the problem is in their anti-DEI insanity, all the program announcements for those programs say, we're here to help serve underserved communities. And they're talking about people who live in South Dakota who live 75 miles from the nearest hospital.
Yep. Rural is underserved. Rural is DEI. People don't remember that.
And the Doge people and Vote and so on see underserved communities, and they're picturing the south side of Chicago or East Baltimore or whatever. But they've just been killing these states, and they're feeling the pain. I mean, the universities in those states, which don't have the endowments that Harvard and Northwestern and so on to survive even a short-term blip. So it's, there's a very good local reason for folks from rural states who tend to be Republican to realize that this is not owning the libs. This is hurting our constituents.
Yeah. I mean, so let's bring it to a close. And Colette, if you can let people know how to get connected to Stand Up for Science.
Yeah, absolutely. So, standupforscience.net, you can sign up for our, emails. We will not spam you. But if you do sign up for our emails now, you'll start getting our daily calls to action on August 1st. We will be hosting Tuesday welcome action call and action hour webinars, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. It's something new that we're doing. So yeah, please follow us on social, get involved. Every action really does count, and that sustained pressure and grassroots lobbying for science as the wedge issue, it's so important in August and going into September too. So
and Colette, you've got 3 or 4 campaigns where people can sign on to declarations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so on our site, we have the NIH Bethesda Declaration that Jeremy really helped us facilitate. We have the NASA Voyager Declaration and the EPA Declaration of Dissent. So these are open still for public signers. One thing I will note about the EPA Declaration of Dissent is that the individuals who signed on to this publicly that work at the EPA were placed on administrative leave and are now under investigation. We expect to find out what's going to happen to them on August 1st. So, we're kind of keeping a close close eye there. But please go sign those letters. Let them know, that you're supporting our public servants who do this science, that are standing up for their agency's mission.
Yeah, but
go please. Closing thoughts.
If I can make a pitch too, follow me on Blue Sky. Jeremy Berg on Blue Sky.
Follow Jeremy.
I spend hours every day sort of doing analyses and posting stuff and keeping people up to date with as much of the craziness as I can digest and share. It's, unfortunately there's been no information inside NIH for NIH folks to share. So a lot of people, even inside NIH, find out about new NIH policies from my Blue Sky account rather than their chain of command. So it's a pretty bizarre world we're living in. But I'm,
well, and I want to, first of all, just two final closing thoughts. One is thank you both for your courage and your leadership. I still believe there's enormous opportunity for us in the pro-democracy movement to make these issues more front and center, because I think they're unifying as opposed to divisive. And I think that, to your point, Dr. Berg, there's no, there isn't really a red blue state thing here. I mean, everyone's being harmed. Everybody will be harmed by this. And that I think, can help expand our coalition. And the second part of that is that I do think your point about, I didn't know specifically about the NIH rural grants, but rural red communities are under assault right now. The tariffs, the immigration policy, the cutting of Medicaid, the weakening of Medicare, which will come if the budget goes the way we think it will, interest rates being high for people in rural areas. And now what you're describing about the weakening of, the NIH grant system. I mean, there are part of what that letter from Katie Britt was about, Senator Britt, was them beginning to sort of find their voice on, like, what are you doing to us, right? Like, we're your peeps, and, we're part of the core team here, and you're turning on us, because it's not just this stuff. There's a much broader assault on the economies of red states and rural areas in the United States by this administration. And part of what we talked about last time, Colette, is that how I think that there's sort of a growing understanding, and if I can speak bluntly, if that's okay, that just Trump doesn't give a shit about the American people, that he cares about himself and a few hundred wealthy other people, some here, some abroad, and that he's, whether it's let them eat cake or whatever the version of this we're going to get to as a phrase and a slogan about his betrayal of all of us, the betrayal of rural areas. I mean, this sort of head fake he did on immigration, where he said, I'm not going to really go after longtime employees in rural areas of farms and so on. That was a lie, right? That was a complete and utter lie. And I think that this growing understanding that he's really there for himself and not for all of us is becoming more widely understood. And even just this week, for everyone who's, I'm a data guy myself, Dr. Berg, and this week in polling, the two major new polls that we had, the Reuters Ipsos and the Economist YouGov, had Trump's numbers falling even further. They were the two worst polls that he's had in each of these tracks since he became president. He's not gaining ground, he's losing ground. And I think that we have to view this next moment as a moment where we're going on offense and we're seizing opportunities as opposed to playing defense and mitigating damage. And I think that it's a mindset change, I think, now with his weakening, that we have to be bolder and more ambitious and more aggressive in our collective action. So it's been great to be in this fight with the two of you. Thank you for all you're doing. And everyone who's watching, please, if you like this conversation today, please like it, share it with others, subscribe to Hopium or YouTube, or wherever you're seeing it, and join the fight. We need you in this battle. We've given you real things you can do. I'll be putting it in the Substack post as well. We're a doer organization here at Hopium. We get things done, and this is an area where we have a lot of doing to do. Thanks, everybody.